While not as well known as the Spitfire, it was really the Hawker Hurricane built in Fort William that won the war.
This is James with Net News Ledger, and you might not know it, but Thunder Bay, which then was Port Arthur and Fort William, played a critical role in the Battle of Britain. How? We're a long way from London. What happened? It's the Hawker Hurricane. The first major campaign fought almost entirely in the air was the Battle of Britain. After the fall of France in June of 1940, the German Luftwaffe fought to get air supremacy over southern England, both to support Operation Sea Lion, which was Hitler's planned invasion of England or Britain, and to support the destruction of the Royal Air Force, the RAF, and make it easier for troops landing in England from Nazi Germany to conquer Britain. Now, this battle was fought by pilots fighting each other in the air. It was a battle that, as Winston Churchill said, never had so much been owed by so many to so few. And the most iconic remembered aircraft from that was the Spitfire. But the truth is, even though it was overshadowed by the Spitfire, the Hawker Hurricane was the backbone of Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain. Now, some key points. The Hawker Hurricane destroyed more German aircraft during the Battle of Britain than all the other air and ground forces combined, according to many estimates. While Spitfires commonly engaged enemy fighters, it was the Hawker Hurricane that focused on the bombers, the Henkel 111s, the Junkers Ju-88s, and the slightly less sleek performance relative to the Spitfires mattered less in those battles. They were stable gun platforms, robust, easy to repair, and they were produced in large numbers. In numbers, at the start of the battle, many, about half of Fighter Command squadrons, were equipped with Hurricanes. They were responsible for approximately 55% of the German Luftwaffe aircraft losses or more during the battle. And Thunder Bay, which was then Port Arthur and Fort William, held a significant role in this because what was then the Canadian Car and Foundry plant, CanCar, was building Hawker Hurricanes. We were making sure in Thunder Bay, or in Fort William at the time, that these aircraft were available to the Canadian and the Royal Air Force. Now, that might not sound all that key because we're a long way away. But it was that safety that we knew the plant could never be attacked by the enemy that let that happen. The output of Hurricanes helped bolster the RAF's capacity, supplying aircrafts that were shipped. And these Canadian-built Hawker Hurricanes participated in the Battle of Britain. Now, the workforce was a lot of women because the men were away fighting battles. They were enlisting in the army. And the Rosie the Riveters, as they became known over time, were building aircraft. And the factory here in Fort William produced much needed production capacity, and it supplemented that Hurricane production because Fighter Command was having a really hard time staying ahead of the game. Now, the Battle of Britain was lost by Germany, and it changed the war. Lost might be a strong word. Hitler failed to achieve his objectives in the Battle of Britain, and that meant, first of all, a failure of air supremacy. It was perhaps the first time that Hitler's second in command, Hermann Goering, was shown up to be less than what he would promise. Those happened a lot of times during the war. Remember, Goering promised the Luftwaffe would support and supply the German troops trapped in Stalingrad, which was really the biggest turning point of the war, where things changed completely and Hitler lost. That was the end of Nazi supremacy for all intents and purposes. The moral uplifting power of not getting dominated by the German Nazi Party and the German military under Adolf Hitler bolstered the confidence of Great Britain, all of its allies, and sent a message around the world that the Germans could be stopped. Remember, they had taken over Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and conquered France in record time. So people were getting convinced at one point that the Germans were undefeatable. Now, Hitler and the German High Command shifted focus after the Battle of Britain, and that turned the invasion off, and they turned to the Eastern Front, the Mediterranean, and North Africa, and then they started the air campaign now known as the Blitz. And that actually happened because one of the German bombing crews dropped bombs on London during the Battle of Britain. And Churchill had the RAF drop bombs on Berlin. And that enraged Hitler and Goering so much that they shifted from blowing up and bombing the British airfields to bombing the civilian population in London and all across southern England. So it was a change that happened because of strategic mistakes, Nazi feelings of hubris and arrogance, and the determination of those British pilots who fought against huge odds and won. The long-term fate of Hitler's war effort after the Battle of Britain was basically sealed. It narrowed Germany's options. The Luftwaffe suffered losses of very experienced pilots that it took a long time to replace. Britain survived to rearm, building up its air fleet and preparing for the sustained defense, but also moving toward the bombing missions under Bomber Command of Fortress Europa. The war didn't end. It was a long way from being over in 1940 when the Battle of Britain was over. But putting together the role of Fort William, the Canada car plant built the Hurricanes, which meant not all their production had to come from Britain or more vulnerable factories. The local workforce, the Rosies of the North, supported war material production, which indirectly made Britain's survival possible in 1940. And overall, that pivotal battle, which many only remember the Spitfire, and I'm not putting the Spitfire down. It was an amazing aircraft too. But the Hawker Hurricane was probably, as the backbone of the RAF, was the winning plane in the Battle of Britain. And if the Battle of Britain had been lost, quite likely the Second World War would have been lost too. This is James with Net News Ledger here in Thunder Bay, talking a little history for you. Tune in next time.